Alright guys, today is the day where I replaced the head gasket on this third generation Toyota Prius. This is a 2012 with 284,000 miles on it. I've driven it about 300 miles or so after the first misfire, and then I raced the code and then it came back and I filled up the coolant as well to full, and now as you can see it is on the low mark. So there is coolant leaking somewhere in the cylinder, so I have to open it up and check it out. I'm going to also show you the symptom of the misfire. As you can see, I'm going to start it up and then you're going to see a little shaking and rattling in the engine, and you'll have a check engine light if it does happen to you. So here are the symptoms. So I'm turning on the engine. And when the gas engine kicks on, you'll see there's a misfire and it's shaking on the engine. And that loud noise, that is the misfire on cylinder 1, and I believe there's a problem in the head gasket, so now we're going to go replace it. As you can see, the check engine light is on as well, and so is the code P0301, cylinder 1 misfire detected, and that's the only code. Alright, so I jacked up the vehicle and put it on jack stand. Next you want to remove the 5 lug nuts. They're 21 millimeter socket lug nut. Once you remove the wheels, you're going to have 4 clips that you need to remove for the engine side cover. Just get a flathead screwdriver and pry it. And there's one more hidden clip over here. I'm removing this top clip to give me more access to the 4th clip. There you go. Once you take this cover off, here is the crank pulley with the crank bolt that you need to loosen before we start disconnecting the battery negative terminal cable and the service plug. So there's a couple ways to break the 19 millimeter crank pulley bolt loose. You could put a socket and a ratchet and brace it by the CV axle right here, and then turn on your engine, and the engine will run and then it'll break the bolt loose because it's being braced right here. Or you could use a impact gun to remove the bolt. It is torqued at 140 foot-pounds, so it's pretty high in torque, so you gotta make sure you have a strong impact gun or use the engine. So I'm using the impact gun method. I remove the crank bolt. Pretty easy. All right, here's the crank bolt. Go ahead and put it back. We're gonna use this later to set the timing. All right, now we're gonna disconnect our negative terminal cable and the service plug. Remove all this out of the way. All right, move this cover. Get a 10 ratchet to remove the nut on the negative terminal cable. Now remove the service plug, push to your left, pull back like that. Drain out your engine coolant and your engine oil. It's right in the back here. The petcock is right here that you could remove the wing nut. Twist it to the left to loosen the wing nut. Once it's done being drained, go ahead and put your wing nut back in. Make sure it's hand tightened. I'm using a 14 millimeter socket for the drain plug. Alright, once it's done draining, go ahead and tighten back up. Alright, here's what the oil looked like. Doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look like coolant mixed in with the oil. Hopefully I caught the engine with this issue before it had a blown head gasket. Didn't overheat at all, and it only lose coolant on cylinder 1. So let's see what it looks like inside. Here's a brief overview of what we're going to be taking out. First, we're going to be taking out the wiper arms, the cowl, the motor, wiper motor, and the tray on the bottom. We're going to take this engine cover off, the air box off, the coolant reservoir off out of the way, the engine mount. And then once we remove all this, we're going to take the air intake out and the whole engine wire harness from the bottom to the top right here, and then we're going to move it out of the way. We're going to take the EGR out. We're going to disconnect the fuel rail, or actually not the fuel rail, the fuel hose over here. and a bunch of other holes down here as well. So we're going to take everything out to get access to the cylinder head. We're going to take this wiper arm out. It's held on by a 14mm nut on all three. This one you're going to push down and wiggle it out of the way. To remove this cowl out of the way, you got to pry this plastic trim up and out of the way, and held on by a clip right here. You just press down on the clip and then remove it. Same with the other side. For that, just disengage the clip right here. There's like 5 of them, and you just pull up. Next, there's 4 10mm bolt on the windshield wiper motor and a connector right here as well. Press up on the connector and you wiggle out. It's right here. And then you slide this to your left to slide out the grommet right here. And then you take the clips off. Take the motor out. Also for this, you're gonna have to squeeze on the bottom to get this one out too. Same with this one on the bottom. There is 12 10mm bolt on the tray. Yep, 12 bolts. All right, now we're gonna remove our engine cover. Now we're gonna remove our air box. 2 clip here, 10 right here. Disconnect this sensor. Remove the air filter. All right, there is 5 10mm bolt that we need to remove. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And lift this up out of the way. So there's 3 sensors in the back on the bottom where the crank pulley is at. You're going to need to remove. This is the crank position sensor, O2 sensor, and the oil pressure sensor right here. So for the crank position sensor, you press the clip on the bottom, you wiggle it out. For the O2 sensor, you're just going to pinch the clip in the back, and then you pull out. Same with this oil pressure sensor, you press on the tab and pull out. All right, one last thing, you got to disconnect the O2 sensor from the connector. Here's the depressor that you got to press on the prong to remove the connector from the O2 sensor. You just press it down, then you're going to pull. Make sure to wiggle it. There you go. Next, from the top, you're going to remove this clip from this timing chain tensioner bracket. There's a little prong that's sticking out on the left side that you got to lift up to your left, and then you pull out from the bracket. Just like that. All right, now we're going to remove the wire harness on the top. There's a 10 right here, clips, the VVTi connector, ignition coil connectors as well. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to remove the ignition coil as well. It's all 10mm. This one you push down and up. Same with this one. This connector sometimes is really hard to pull or pinch, so I use a flathead screwdriver right behind where it clips and lift it up and pull like that. Same with the ignition coil connector. Now I'm going to remove the ground wire that connects to the engine mount right here. There's a clip that you got to pinch and remove. This 2 10mm ground wire as well. This water pump connector, the AC compressor, the knock sensor, the throttle body connector as well. So make sure when you are removing the AC compressor connector, You gotta cover it up so that no fluid drops in here or else it's gonna go bad. Then we're gonna remove this bolt. Alright, so the AC connector is really tricky. So I'm using a hook. I pry it into the prong down on the bottom. So I lift it out of the tab and then I pull up. That's how I got it out the connector. Same with this throttle body connector. It's really tough. So I use the pick, go underneath, pry it up, and pull it out. Next I'm going to remove this breather hose. Gonna remove this 10mm bolt. Next I'm gonna remove the 4 fuel injector connector, and then I'm gonna remove the intake manifold. There's one bolt here, nut, bolt, and a nut. So basically you pinch on the tab and pull up. The intake manifold is held on by a 12mm nut and bolt. Remove this connector on top. Remove this EGR connector. There's a 12mm bolt that you gotta remove. Right now we gotta remove this connector. This 10mm bolt that's covering up the EGR pipe. And then there's 2 10mm bolts that we gotta remove for the EGR pipe itself. Alright, next you're gonna remove this 2 coolant hose and the PCV hose in the back. This hose look like this because it's a modified for the oil catch can that I have. So if yours doesn't look like this, don't worry about it. So just remove it from the PCV hose to the PCV in the back. Also, you got to remove this bottom hose right here as well. And this side hose. And this connector. So once I have the intake manifold out, I'm going to pinch the clip on the bracket of the intake manifold out. There's one right here and one on over here. Alright, never use this type of hose. Always use the oil resistant type of hose, the black one. This hose melted onto the PCV valve. So I'm replacing the PCV valve anyway, so I'm just going to have to remove this 22mm socket. I'm using a wrench right now. Alright, the PCV is torqued down to 15 foot-pounds. Okay, 15 foot-pounds. Alright, now we're going to remove the EGR and the EGR cooler. This is held on by 12mm nut in the front with the E8 torque and 2 12mm nut in the back. And then there's a top 12mm bolt on the top and one on the bottom that you got to remove. And there's 2 coolant line that's going into the EGR cooler, one on top and one on the side right here. Alright, this part is hard to film since it's in a tight space. If you want more in-depth video, we have an EGR removal video that you can watch to see where all the bolts and nuts are at. There's also a 10mm bolt right here. Once you got everything out of the way, drape the wire harness to the right side. Move this hose on the cylinder head. Alright, the hose I took off earlier, make sure to put it back into the intake manifold. It's on the side. So I'm going from the left side of the engine to get the EGR nut in the back of the cooler. I'm using a 1/2 inch ratchet with a 12mm socket. There's the nut. So earlier, the top nut, I used a short 12mm socket. Now I'm using a deeper 12mm socket for the bottom nut. Here's the second nut. And the last one is a hidden, it's a 12mm nut, and it's hard to get it to it, so I'm gonna remove this hose that's connecting to the cylinder head. I'm gonna remove this hose and this hose to get access to the bottom of the nut. To get the hidden bolt, I'm using an extension, a little short extension from 3/8 to 1/2, and I'm using a 1/2 12mm socket to get in there. Now you're gonna use your finger to loosen manually, and here's the nut. Next, you're gonna remove the stud. I'm using a 3/8 ratchet with an E8 Torx to remove the stud. Here's the stud. Now you can remove your EGR. All right, now we got to remove the 12mm bolt, the hose clamp right here, and two nut that's 10, and another bolt on the back right here. And now we can take the EGR out. And the 10mm bolt in the back. And then there's a connector here that you got to remove. Same with this coolant hose line right here that you got to remove the clamp, pinch the clamp, move it to the side. And a 12mm bolt right here that you got to remove. And also, if you can look from this side right here, there's a 12mm bolt right there that you got to remove, and one on the side on the bracket that's mounted to the transmission housing. So to remove this, just pinch on the connector and pull out. I'm using a deep 12 to remove the bolt in here. There you go. And a deep 12 as well down here. All right, here's the bolt. Now you want to remove the radiator hose to get to the 12mm bolt down there. There you go. They're all same size bolt. Make sure to take note, this one that mounts to the engine cylinder head is longer than the two that is mounted onto the transmission housing. All right, now I'm going to remove the water pump. They're all 12mm bolt. And there's one more on the bottom that you could reach from the side. So I removed the two front. It's a shorter bolt. This one on top is longer, and this one on the side right here, it's longer, and the bottom one is going to be short. So this is the longer bolt. And here's the last bolt on the bottom of the water pump. Careful of coolant coming down. Make sure when you are removing the bottom bolt of the water pump, have a bolt on top brace the fall of the water pump. So make sure to put one bolt back up on top before you remove this bottom bolt right here. That way the water pump doesn't fall on you. Here's the short bolt. So this is what I did with the top bolt. I hold the water pump in place so that I could remove the bottom bolt. Or you could just remove the bottom bolt first and then remove the top bolt. So here's the water pump out. Alright, next I'm going to remove 2 10mm bolt on the coolant reservoir, and then 2 on the AC line bracket. They're both 10mm bolt. Then after that, we're going to remove the 14mm nut on the bottom of the engine mount, and 4 17mm bolt, and 1 nut on the engine mount. So to get the 14mm nut, I'm using a flexible ratchet with a deep 14mm socket. Here's the nut. And the engine will dip a little bit. Don't forget about this 10 as well. All right, make sure to know your bolt as well. The long one is onto the engine mount to the side right here, and the 3 short one is onto the body, and the nut is on this one right here. Don't forget about this 10. All right, you got to remove this 8mm stud and 3 14mm bolt on the engine mount to the cylinder head. Here's the bottom bolt. Here's the side bolt. And here's the last bolt. Now I'm going to remove the valve cover. There's 12 outside 10mm bolt and 1 10mm bolt in the middle that you got to remove. So the 12 bolt on the outside you can remove. This one stays in place. Now it's time to pry the valve cover open. There's a spot right here. You could use the pry bar and you could just dig it in here and push up. There you go. Now I'm going to remove the spark plugs. I'm using a 14mm socket with an extension. So cylinder 1 misfired, so the spark plug is pretty stuck in there. It's probably got seized in there somehow from the misfire. So I'm going to remove the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th cylinder. As you can see, the spark plug is pretty foul right now. All right, now I'm going to set the timing. I'm going to go down below and use a 19mm socket to crank the bolt on the crank pulley. So turn it clockwise. I'm going to look for a line, but then it has a notch at the end as well towards the chain. So this is not the line that you want to look for. You want to look for the one that has a notch that is closest to the timing chain. So there's one line, then a notch that is next to it. So I'm using a 19mm socket, turning on the crank bolt, and I'm using a bunch of extension with a 1/2-inch ratchet breaker bar. So I'm going to turn it until I see that one right there. There's a line with a notch. I'm going to aim it for 2 o'clock right there. That should be good. And now your timing is set at top dead center on cylinder 1. And you can also see this little mark right here that's pointing at 12 o'clock as well. So you want this to be 2 and this one to be 12. All right, once the timing is set, I'm going to remove the 3 gold 12mm bolt and the 10mm bolt, the black one, from the bearing cap of the camshaft. Make sure they're all loosened. Lift it up. Now I'm going to put a paper towel on top of the camshaft. And then I'm going to put the bearing cap back in. And then tighten the 10mm bolt. Just hand tighten. So that'll hold the camshaft in place. And the timing mark will be not moved. Now once you got that in place, we're going to go down there and remove the oil filter housing. Now we're going to remove the 4 12mm bolt that's holding the oil filter housing. Make sure to have an oil pan underneath because it's going to drip. Alright, now I'm going to remove the crank bolt and the crank pulley. There is 4 14mm bolt on the timing cover, and then there is 11 12mm bolt that's around the timing cover. The 4 that we removed from the oil filter housing, that was down there already removed. If you haven't removed it, that's included with the timing cover. Then there's a 10mm bolt in the middle right here. To get the 14, I'm using a breaker bar with a 14mm short socket. Here's one bolt. All right, there's 5 that I can get from the top. And then there's 6 that I have to get from the bottom. Well, I guess I can remove this 4 from the top as well. Here's the last 2 bolts, this one and this one hidden up on top. Once all the 12mm bolt is out, don't forget about this 10mm bolt in the middle. This 10mm bolt stays with the timing cover. Before prying the timing cover, make sure to remove the 2 nuts in the back of the timing chain tensioner. All right, here's 1 nut. Here's the 2nd nut with the bracket and the timing chain tensioner. Now we're going to pry the timing cover off. There is a gap between the timing cover and the camshaft housing. Just get a pry tool between there and pry it open. All right, now take the timing cover off. Now you want to remove the chain tensioner slipper. Then you want to remove the 2 12mm bolt on the chain vibration damper. Now you can remove the timing chain. Next, you want to remove 14 of the 12mm bolt. You already removed the 3 right here already, so you don't have to worry about it. But there's 3 here, 3, 3, 3, and then 1 over here and 1 hidden on the back. All right, once all the bolts are out, there's a gap between the camshaft housing and the head. So you just have to pry it with a pry tool and lift up, just like that. Next, I'm going to remove the 3 12mm bolt on the heat shield of the exhaust, and a 14 millimeter down there by the bracket. Here's the 14 millimeter bolt. After that, there's 5 12 millimeter nut in the back of the exhaust that's mounted to the head. So we got to remove that. I'm using a 1-inch extension with a deep socket. This 5th bolt is a little tricky. You need an extension to get to there. All right, make sure to remove this fuel hose. This is a cover. You just pry it to the right and then lift up on the cover. And then you're gonna wiggle the cover out like that. And then there's 2 yellow tabs on the side that you squeeze and you pull up. Make sure you have a rag underneath so it doesn't spill the fuel down there. So just press on the yellow clip, wiggle it back and forth and lift up. Now we're gonna remove our roller rockers. Make sure when you take it out, it comes back in the same way it is. So make sure where it is on your roller rockers. This is cylinder 1, 2, 3, and 4. Make sure it's the same position when you put it back, okay? This is the intake side, this is the exhaust side. So if you need to, label it. And when you reinstall, make sure it's properly installed the same way that you take it out. And these are valve caps, so make sure don't lose them. You can either take it out or you can leave it in. Next is removing 10 of the head bolt. There's 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. I'm using a M12 triple square spline bit socket. To remove the head bolt, you have to go in their pattern. It's 1 down on the bottom of the left, 2 on the top right, 3 on the top left, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 in the middle. Also, I'm using a breaker bar to break the bolt loose. I'm using a 1/2 to 3/8 adapter. This one came in 3/8. So I'm going to do 1 turn at a time. All right, now it's loose. So you go and loosen some more. it was about 2 passes before it started loosening. So now I'm using a 3/8 ratchet to loosen the rest of the bolt. Make sure to remove the head bolt washer as well. Don't lose them. There should be 10 of them. All right, after all the head bolt is removed, go ahead and pry right here. Pry up on the head to break it loose. Make sure this hose is removed as well. All right, once the head is lifted, go ahead and have a good grip on this to take it out of the exhaust in the back.